Hello readers, I'm Amy and today I'm going to talk about Hyphened Nation by Nicole Draffen. Usually I would try and put the book on the shelf behind me, and I'm glad I actually remembered that I try to usually do that, but I'm going to keep this in my hand. It's going to move around the screen a lot because I took notes. Disclaimer, I did receive this book in exchange for a review. Now, does giving my honest opinion on a book that I received for review make me a little bit nervous? Yeah, I think it would make most people nervous. But am I still going to tell you exactly what I think of this book? Yes. Yes, I am. So let's actually start with the PR box. So it was some agent of some kind for Nicole who had reached out to me initially saying like, hey, does this book sound like something you'd be interested in? Can we send it to you? And I said yes, and then I get a box from the author, and I just expected a book, you know? But I have this whole Hyphened Nation PR box, which is actually pretty cool. Here we just have a little brochure describing what is Hyphened Nation. Basically, Hyphened Nation is about how Nicole went to Wales for like some event or another, and as a person of color, she was pretty used to being called like African American, African hyphen American, while being in America. But going to Britain, she's just known as an American. She is from the continent of North America. She lives in America. That's what she is. She's just American. And so she writes this whole book about how going to another country is ultimately what made her feel like a full American, because the idea of living in America and having your name or your identity be hyphenated makes you feel less of an American. That's essentially what this book is about. So this brochure just describes that. I have this little don't check the box pouch, which don't check the box is referring to like don't check the race box for what race you are, especially if it's hyphenated. Like, you can just be part of your country. You shouldn't be hyphenated countries necessarily, if that makes any sense. This bag has it has like strings and beads and stuff, which I imagine go to these two little don't check the box bracelets. I also have a Hyphened Nation sticker, a don't check the box sticker. We've got this little Hyphened Nation box that has whatchamacallums, cufflinks that also say don't check the box and Hyphened Nation. And then last two little things in here, we have a don't check the box and a Hyphened Nation pin. I really like pins. Pins are so just collectible and fun, and these are nice ones. They're not like the button pins where you print it off and put it under the plastic. Like, these are enamel pins. This is really nice. So as for the book itself, I'm not entirely sure where to start talking about this. I'm glad that I read it. Sorry if there's background noise. My husband is very loudly getting something to eat out of the kitchen. This is divided into chapters. It's a very small book. It's not counting the what is Hyphened Nation section. It's 112 pages. In some respects, I think that this could have been a little bit longer, and in other respects, I think it could have been a little bit shorter, which I will get into more. This is divided into chapters. If you decide to read it, I do recommend reading the introduction. It just kind of introduces how Nicole decided to go over to the UK, and just kind of a brief introduction of I felt more American there than I did in America. It does state at the beginning of this book, I might as well get it out of the way. Some of you may feel I'm not qualified to write this book. I don't hold any degrees from our country's prestigious universities. I enjoy reading about history, but I am no scholar. I am neither a sophisticated globetrotter nor an expert on global affairs. So she does set that at the beginning of the book, being like, I'm not an academic on this, I'm just talking about it from my personal experience. With having 112 pages, these are also really small, digestible chapters. There are, I think like 6 chapters in this book? Let me flip back through. 9 chapters. There are 9 chapters in this book. Kind of divided, you have like the mantle, where she's talking about the mantle of consciousness. So this cloak kind of that covers her that sometimes she's aware of and sometimes she's not, depending on who she interacts with. It's like the kind of thing that sets her apart from other people, which I think was interesting to talk about. And Epiphany is chapter 2. That's going to be about going to the UK and feeling more American and deciding to write a book about the hyphen. Then you have chapter 3, which is more talking about the hyphen and the language. Past Presidential Perspective is chapter 4. That was really interesting because that goes more into presidents, particularly Roosevelt. And I'll go ahead and read this out to kind of like talk about some of the interesting things that I think that I learned from this book. This is a quote from Roosevelt. "There is no room in this country for hyphenated Americanism. A hyphenated American is not an American at all. The one absolutely certain way of bringing this nation to ruin would be to permit it to become a tangle of squabbling nationalities, an intricate knot of German Americans, Irish Americans, English Americans, French Americans, Scandinavian Americans, or Italian Americans, each at heart feeling more sympathy with Europeans of that nationality than with the other citizens of the American Republic. There is no such thing as a hyphenated American who is a good American. The only man who is a good American is the man who is American and nothing else." I never had bad feelings about Roosevelt. I don't know that I had, like, the warm and fuzzies for him. I don't really, besides recently, I don't really know much about our presidents. I know some of the basics, but, like, I haven't gotten to know each of the presidents in their lives. This quote actually made me feel kind of gross. Roosevelt is a very, very popular president, called Teddy Roosevelt because his first name is Theodore, and when I think Teddy, I think teddy bear, I think cuddly, I think sweet. But my first thing that I noted with this quote, so there's no room in this country for hyphenated Americanism. So, like, people shouldn't be part American. If they're American, and that's it. And that idea sounds great. That sounds like what this book is supporting. But other things that I noted in talking about German, Irish, English, French, Scandinavian, and Italian Americans, not to say that they don't have issues, like they do. If you are an immigrant to America in any way, people are probably going to take issue with you. But each of those nationalities is, for the most part, white represented. So right there, like, the problem he has with hyphenation seems to mostly be restricted to white American immigrants, or white immigrants to America. That made me feel like a little bit gross. And also, the last part of this, talking about hyphenated Americans aren't good Americans, this was during wartime, so it's like, if you feel connected to the German population because you're an immigrant from Germany, then you're really an American enemy. So, like, either be American or don't be American, don't be this half and half. So that's an interesting quote that I wanted to mention. One of the issues, though, one of the main issues I had with this book is concerning things like this quote. Like I stated from her intro at the beginning of the book, she doesn't have, like, a degree or anything, which is fine. Like, you can write whatever you want, whether or not you've pursued higher education. I'm not going to judge you for that. But having the education that I have, working on my second bachelor degree, I have had to write a lot of professional papers. And when you are writing a paper, including quotes, including statistics, all of this stuff, like, this book is filled with quotes and statistics and facts, and none of them are properly cited, which bothers me because I would have huge points taken off of my papers if I did not cite things properly. There is a bibliography at the back of the book that lists several resources that were used, but those resources aren't referenced within the text. So you might say, oh, here's Amy's paper that I used to write my book, and I'm going to list Amy's paper in the resources. Cool. But in the book, right next to the quote from my paper, you should be writing what page number, or you should be writing my last name, or somehow referencing which paper it is that you used. That was a big thing for me, just because, like, I've had this concept of using resources properly and citing them properly just beaten into my very soul. by college educators. So that was something that bothered me. Also, some of the quotes are italicized and some are not. There's quite a few sections in here. Again, this is a personal thing. This is not affecting my feelings on what Nicole had to say. This book is self-published, and I feel like when it comes to self-publishing, there's just not as much editing as more traditional publishing. That's the idea that I get of it, at least. So there are several like grammatical errors with italicizing or not italicizing when appropriate. Some like punctuations are a little out of place, which again, that's fine. That's just something that bothers me a little bit because college educators have just beaten me to a pulp with these ideas. So that's a me thing. But as for the content, I think it's very good. Overall, I feel like this is a really great kind of introduction to race as a topic. So there are tons of books out there about race. There are 300 pages, there are 600 pages, there are tiny little 100 and some page books like this. And I think that the idea of reading nonfiction in general isn't appealing to a lot of people necessarily because it can get a little dry, it can get a little heavy. And if you're looking at, should I read this 300-page book about race? Well, maybe I don't want to read 300 pages about it. And some nonfiction books that are that long can feel a little repetitive. So I like that this is of this size. I like that it's condensed. It kind of focuses on the one issue. So I think if you're hesitant to read a longer nonfiction book, this could be a good starter. However, as for, I think it could be a little longer, I think it could be a little shorter. There is one chapter in here, chapter 6, Notes on the English Language. This is a chapter that I feel should have been taken out completely. I think like the topic of English language is certainly relevant since we're talking about a hyphenated people, but the chapter just kind of rubs me the wrong way, honestly. She's talking about basically how whoever you are, wherever you come from, you need to be able to speak very proper English whenever you're in America or someone's going to look down on you. And I understand the idea of that. Like, people will look down on you if you have a certain accent, if you have a certain way of speaking. That's just how intolerant people are. But the way she says it just kind of rubs me the wrong way. And I think that can happen throughout a lot of this book. The way she says things, or the way she talks about things, I think in a lot of this book can be a little oversimplified. So she might be like, this is the way I grew up, this is my feeling on this topic. And it's like, but you also have to consider, like, what are the cultural and social considerations of that? How does someone's upbringing that may be different from yours heavily influence how they might see this situation differently? Like, I think there is just a lot of oversimplification. So I probably would have done away with that chapter completely. And then when it comes to the oversimplification, I would have liked if she'd expanded on some ideas in this book a little bit more. However, overall, Hyphened Nation, definitely worth checking out. I like that it was pretty short and precise. I like that she didn't, I mean, not that I like that she didn't have, like, the big college education, but it's that whenever you're writing from an academic point of view, like, there are a lot of academic books that I have that you know they're academic because it is so hard to keep your attention when reading those through the language. But in this book, for the most part, it is very conversational, and I like that. Being able to read a conversational book about race rather than an academic book that throws a lot of heavy language at you and a lot of heavy concepts and assumes your educational background. Like, I'd prefer to read a conversational book. It's less dry, it's more interesting, it's more personable. So I do like that. Overall, I would give this probably 3.5 to 4 stars. Definitely worth checking out. So all in all, definitely worth checking out. I would probably give this 3.5 or 4-ish stars. I haven't really decided yet, but worth checking out. So please pick up Hyphened Nation by Nicole Draffen. I'm gonna keep this book on my shelf for sure. And also I've highlighted it and I've tabbed it and I've underlined, and I want to return to this book and I want to dive into this book more and compare it to some other books on race that I've read, and just, I might have to complete my thoughts a little bit more before I actually give it a rating. But that is it for this video. So please like, subscribe, be my friend on social media. I will see all of you in my next video. Bye, friends.